MiniSynth is a simple to use yet versatile subtractive synthesizer that comes built into FL Studio Mobile. It is capable of a variety of sounds including bass, pads, leads and special effects. This tutorial guides you through how MiniSynth works. It will help you to make the most of the included presets or how to create your own sounds from scratch. You can load a MiniSynth track with the Add Channel button in the playlist. By default, the list of presets appears. Touch a category to open it. Touch a preset to choose it. Touch it again to preview it. Or play a connected controller keyboard to preview it. When you are finished choosing, press the X here or to the right of the list. I've chosen a simple bass sound. I can play it on the touch keyboard, a connected controller keyboard, or sequence notes in its piano roll. Press the arrow button here to open the rack and reveal the MiniSynth interface. Here is where you can adjust the sound. You can automate these changes by moving one of the parameters, such as the filter cutoff here, then pressing the control button here, and using Add Automation Track. Close the piano roll, then tap in the automation track, then the Add Clip button to create one. Double tap to enter this clip. Now tap to add points to create your automation shape. To remove the automation, close the editor, then tap and hold the clip and choose Delete. Back in the piano roll, I'm going to adjust the volume of different notes. If I drag this semicircle upwards, it reveals the velocity editor. Now you can change the individual velocity of each note. In MiniSynth, on the Filter tab, use the Velocity Track Fader so the velocity applies to the filter as well as the volume. This can be handy to add variation to your part. Now I want to create a new sound instead of using a preset. Back in an empty project, I'm going to add a MiniSynth, but instead of choosing a preset, I will tap to the right here. Now MiniSynth is in its initialized state. I will open the rack and start to change the parameters to create my sound. MiniSynth is organized into 6 tabs, each grouping a different set of parameters. The first is the oscillator. Here you can choose one of several different kinds of oscillator. The modifier parameter does something different depending on the oscillator kind you choose. There is also a noise parameter and a transpose of plus and minus 12 semitones. Double tap a parameter to reset it. The first oscillator kind is the saw. With the modifier at 0, only a saw waveform plays. As you increase the modifier, a pulse waveform is mixed in with increasing width. With the modifier at 50, it's a mix of a saw and a square wave. As you keep increasing, the width of the square will decrease again. This can be useful for unusual combinations of shapes or pulse width modulation style effects. The next oscillator kind is saw plus saw. This plays 2 saw oscillators. The modifier changes the pitch of one of the oscillators. At 0, it is 1 octave below the first. At 50, they are close to each other's pitch. And at 100, it's 1 octave above. This is useful for octave style effects or fifth pad sound effects. The pulse kind is like the saw kind but without the accompanying saw. Again, this is useful for pulse width modulation style effects, but if you leave the modifier at 0, it allows you to just add noise by itself. Saw plus square plays a saw wave and a square wave at a different pitch. Square plus square plays 2 square waves. And the super saw is a special kind. It plays multiple saw oscillators at slightly different pitches, creating a really thick sound. The modifier changes the difference in pitch between all the saw oscillators. This is very useful for lead sounds, chord sounds, and even respaces. The bell kind plays multiple saw waveforms. Its modifier shifts their phase in relation to each other, creating an effect similar to oscillator sync. Def saw, again, plays 2 saw oscillators, but in this case the modifier changes the phase instead of the pitch of one of the oscillators. Spread octave plays multiple saw oscillators in different octaves. The modifier changes their pitch in relation to each other slightly for a chorusing effect. Spread fifth is similar, but instead of an octave shift, it uses a musical fifth. The filter tab has a resonant low-pass filter. The cutoff will change the filter frequency. The resonance will increase the filter peak that follows the cutoff. Keyboard tracking means the note you play will also shift the cutoff frequency. To demonstrate, here first without any, then with keyboard tracking set to maximum. It is especially useful if you're playing notes across a large range on the keyboard, as it means each note has the same number of harmonics. As shown earlier, velocity tracking means higher velocity notes will also shift the cutoff frequency. The filter envelope generator will change the filter cutoff frequency over time every time you play a note. Increase the amount for it to take effect. The attack is the onset. Higher values will have a slower onset. The decay is the time it takes for the envelope to reach the sustain value. release time occurs after you let go of a note. I will come back to this as it only applies if you also have a long volume release envelope. A negative amount will invert the envelope shape. The LFO can automatically modulate the filter cutoff frequency, oscillator frequency, or modifier. Choose the target with the destination menu. First, I will choose the filter cutoff. Increase the amount here. Change the speed here. And the shape here. Choose the oscillator frequency as the destination for vibrato. Set the destination as the modifier, and the result will depend on the oscillator kind you are using. Here with the saw, for example. With the bell kind. The LFO tab also holds the mod wheel settings. This applies to an external controller mod wheel, or if you resize the touch keyboard large enough, you can enable the controls here and use the mod control here. At the moment, the target is the filter, but you can also choose frequency and modifier again. The Master tab contains the volume envelope generator. Again, you can choose attack, decay, sustain and release. A longer attack will result in a slower onset of the sound, useful for pads. A low sustain and a low decay will result in a short plucky sound. Increasing the release will mean after you let go of a note, the sound will continue. If I go back to the filter envelope generator, I can apply corresponding settings. The voices mode changes the way notes are played. In poly mode, you can play as many notes at the same time as you need. For chords, for example, the slide parameter will add a pitch slide between each set of new notes. If you set the voices mode to mono, however, only one note plays at a time. Lead mode is the same as mono, but the slide will only activate if you overlap two notes. This is effectively a legato mode, letting you choose only certain notes to slide, by overlapping them or not. The last tab is the Effects tab, which itself contains 4 tabs at the bottom. There is distortion, delay, chorus and a phaser. Each has an on-off switch to the left. The distortion has drive, a form of saturation, and decimate, which will reduce the sample rate of the audio running through it. Use this with a high resonance for vowel-style effects. The delay has feedback, filter, mix and time settings. The feedback changes the number of delays you will hear. The filter applies a low-pass filter to the delayed signal. The mix adjusts the balance between the dry, undelayed signal and the delayed signal. The time adjusts the timing of the delay. The chorus duplicates and pitch shifts the signal for a fuller sound. The effect runs in stereo so it can be used to add stereo presence to what you are working on. The rate controls the speed of the pitch shift, the depth the amount of the pitch shift, and the mix the balance between the dry and wet signals. The phaser applies a comb filtering effect. Again, the mix is the balance between the dry and wet signal. The frequency is the center point of the comb filtering. The feedback is the peaks of the comb filtering. The width is the amount of modulation. Again applied in stereo. And the speed is the speed of the modulation. Now I'm going to create some typical sounds from scratch and put them together in a simple project. I have already sequenced some parts with MiniSynth in its initialized state. Let's start with the bass line. Let's add some pad chords. Now let's add an arpeggio. Let's add a sound effect. Let's put them all together and tweak the settings. MiniSynth also exists in the plugin version of FL Studio Mobile inside FL Studio 12 and as a standalone plugin. Thank you for watching this MiniSynth tutorial.